back, she just came up with her poetry collection, Sky Full of Bucket Lists. She already has two poetry collections, The Voices Never Stop in 2012 and Conditions Apply in 2014 from the Writers Workshop, Kolkata. Her work has been anthologized in journals and books of poetry and Japanese short forms. Recently, her poem Just Married was selected and translated by Gulzar in his work A Poem a Day, published by HarperCollins. She's also the poetry editor of Sonic Boom Journal and its imprint Yavanika Press. She is one of the organizers at the Quarantine Train, a poetry workshop founded by Arjun Rajendran, whom we all know very well. And she runs Small Differences, an NGO which works with elderly, abandoned people and transgender community. Apart from that, Shobhana is a beautiful soul. I'm just waiting for all this lockdown to end so that I can get my copy of this autographed. And not only is the poetry beautiful, but this is a beautiful book. It's an extremely beautiful book, and people who are jealous of my books should definitely be jealous of me having this right now and go and get your copy on Amazon. So with that, Shobna, do you want to say something before we get into the poetry reading?
Thank you so much, Kinjal. I'm truly honored to be here. Like I mentioned before we started, this is very, very special for me because this is the first reading of the book. I feel very privileged to share this moment with fellow writers who write forms that I dare not attempt. You know, fiction is, I mean, I write short stories, but a full length novel is something I don't think I'm ever going to be capable of attempting at all. So thank you for the very warm welcome. And I really look forward to learning from you as much as I hope I will be sharing. Thank you.
So just to give a general idea of what we will be doing in the next 2 hours is we'll be reading some of Shobna's poetry. Then there'll be introduction to her work. Then the session will be thrown open for Q&A, after which Shobna will guide us through a writing exercise. So my humble request to everybody is to be on mute till you're asking your questions so that we can make the most of the 2 hours we have with Shobna. So yeah, Shobna, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Kinjal. So I thought I'll read a couple of a couple of Haibun from the book, if that's okay with all of you. Yes, I have a picked selection with, I hope to be speaking about it in the next couple of hours. The first one is, like Kinjal mentioned, I do run an NGO where we work with extremely marginalized communities, and that's how this book largely came out. So the first one is called Being. Being. His alcoholic frame has almost given up. His breath rasps in erratic intervals. The veins in his eyes are bloody. Irises move across the room to the nurse in hurried urgency. Tears. Monochrome sky, hopes pinned on crayoned walls. Monochrome sky, hopes pinned on crayoned walls. The last call to his family is cut halfway through. At the morgue, he joins anonymous, unclaimed memories. Someday, an eager medical student will slice through his remains and learn a thing or two about human anatomy. Holy chance, embers of another life. Holy chance, embers of another life. Far away, a family moves on. Forgetting becomes a habit. Stargazing, still looking for the Gemini twins. Stargazing, still looking for the Gemini twins. One of the reasons that I took to writing Haibun from all the experiences that have come my way is because I wanted to maintain the distance between what was happening around me and what was going on inside the head. Um, I mean, that's how it came about. The second one I'd like to read, and I will share the screen if that's okay with you. Um, yes. Can I share the screen, Kinja?
Yes, you can share the screen.
Yeah, all right. Okay. The second one is called Daydream, and it goes like this. Learning to tell the male from female, rose-ringed parakeets. She emerges from the laser clinic smooth-skinned and glowing. She looks beautiful. In an ideal world, she might have found love, even made it last. She blushes when we compliment her, but she really doesn't care. Love is perhaps enough for you. For me, happiness is just finding myself. Just me, she adds for emphasis. We look away. We picture her several years from now. She wears dark rimmed spectacles. Tinges of grey streak the dark as ebony hair. Wrinkles just begin to appear. She doesn't wear makeup, so the signs show ever so gently. She looks stern, intellectual, and almost like prose. Broken remote control. Memories pause at fast forward. Broken remote control. Memories pause at fast forward. So the third one that I have for you is called Remnants, and it happened during the months of the lockdown, as we watched ourselves safely ensconced in our homes. But the world on the streets was very, very different, and so this is just a snippet from that. It's called
So,
Remnants. Yeah, I'll stop that. Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
you
I'll
want
stop
me to
that.
share
Sorry.
this one?
Yes, please. Could you please?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Remnants. The kiosk is run by a lady who opens shop at 7 in the evening every day. In the corporate world, she may have won accolades for her punctuality. But here, there's only the haphazard queue of auto and cab drivers and daily wagers who squat on plastic stools to eat, perhaps their first meal of the day. She's always been generous with her portions. Now, with the lockdown, there is only a dark pool of spilled oil from her kerosene stove. Kiosks don't qualify for essential services. Moonbow, no omens for the future in sight. Moonbow, no omens for the future in sight. Most of what I write has a lot to do with people. But then our furry friends um, do become prominent memory um, occasionally. And I'd like to just read one for you before we move on to the conversations. Just trying to find, yeah, it's called Wishbone. Wishbone. He's decided to keep her orphaned name, Tia. She was abandoned twice, he says, pleading us to bring her home. Sand castles, a cormorant keels into the shore. Sand castles, a cormorant keels into the shore. The response is a series of buts. An apartment is not ideal for a dog. She'll get bow legs. She will need more room than an overcrowded flat. What will she do all day in an empty house? Rearing a pet always ends up being another mom chore. 20th birthday, a scrapbook full of stuffed toy pictures. 20th birthday, a scrapbook full of stuffed toy pictures. Surely love trumps space, he says. After a few days, we hear Tia has found a home. It was never meant to be, we say. Garage sale, love letters to the dead. Garage sale, love letters to the dead. This poem came about because during the process of writing the book, I discovered how prejudiced we as people can be ourselves. So it was more like holding a mirror to myself. That's how this one came about. So over to you, Kinjal. If
Uh, Thank you so much, Shobna. So, like, I know that you used to write free verse before you moved to Haibun. So, can you tell us a little of your journey from free verse to Haibun and why this form and how what is your relationship with the two forms?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking me that, Kinjal, because I find in the free verse world, I'm always looked at as a haiku poet, as a haiku writer, and in the haiku world, I'm always looked at as a freelance free verse writer. So it's like it's always been a cat on the wall situation. But yeah, so I've been writing ever since I think I was 12. So my dad, who insisted that I keep a diary. My dad taught at the Lawrence School of Dale, and that's where I spent my entire childhood. And so I started writing poems right then, and oddly enough, most of the poems were about death, and I dared not show it to anybody except my father, who was very, very indulgent of me. And it just went. I was a closet writer for the longest time, and sometime it was only in sometime in 2000 that I joined this very amateur poetry forum called. It's still alive, I think, on the internet. It was called poemsandquotes.com. So a motley crew of us from all over the world attempting various forms. And there were some very encouraging writers from all over the world who insisted that we try structured forms. And that's where I stumbled upon haiku. And what I wrote then was not haiku at all, right? It was just 3-line poetry. And that's how often we mistake this powerful short Japanese form. It's not 3-line poetry, as all of us know. But I was writing abysmal stuff back then, and it was only in 2011 or 12. I'm not too sure about the date. When Gabriel Rosenstock, a very renowned hygiene, was conducting a poetry workshop in the Hyderabad Literary Festival. So I just jumped on the next flight and landed there because I was very enamored by this form. At this time, I was writing free verse, very clunky verses. They were long, and I knew that I had to work on craft to make it shorter. And this 3-line form really appealed to me. So went there, and Kala Ramesh was there, and fascinated by the form and realized, man, this is not easy to write, right? There's just so much that went on. And so I came back, and then I joined In Haiku, a forum where I dabbled a little bit. It was only in 2014 that I actually fell in love with Haibun. I was introduced to it by Geetanjali Rajan and Sonam Choki. They're the ones who've written the blurbs for my book, mentors, friends, and they are my sensei. Geetanjali is a Japanese teacher, and she spent 20 years. And Sonam is so steeped in Buddhist and Zen aesthetics that their writing is of a different level entirely. So that's how I just fell in love with Haibun. And yeah, it's a form that, kind of called out to me, really, it really did. Sometimes there's so much you cannot say in a poem that you can say very beautifully in prose. So that's how I attempted that. Yeah, and it's been a journey. So I've been doing collaborative writing with Geetanjali and Sonam now. We've been working on it for about 7 years. So yeah, so learned a lot from them.
Nice. And also coming to this particular book, like it's like those who cannot see it, the content page it's divided into sections called motif, within, conversations, work, streets, beyond. There's a lot of space for the reader, so there's a lot of space around each haibun, and so generally, it's a very aesthetic book. Not only the verses, but the book itself. So, Shobna, can you speak a little about that, the structure that went into it, and also
Right.
each section begins with a thing like Act One, Scene One,
Yeah.
and each section begins with a play like quality. So, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Kinjal, the aesthetics of the book is it's completely Divya Jyoti of Red River Press. I mean, he's amazing, the kind of energy he brought to the book. And being a writer himself, being a poet himself, he brought tremendous aesthetics to the book. So I actually sent out this manuscript in March 2019 to him. And then I knew it was not done. He sent me, he went through it and he sent me the cover page immediately over the weekend. Okay, I sent it to him on a Friday and he sent this to me and I loved it. And I said, but the title was not this. We went through several title revisions. Um, Thank you for pointing this thing about space. I think space is something that is very, very inherent to all haikai forms, where you leave a lot of things unsaid so that the reader has a lot of space to come in. Both in Haibun writing, you try to make the writing sparse so that there is room for interpretation and for the reader to take a leap from. And yes, the play-like setting was deliberate. It came from multiple influences. One of it was during my work with the marginalized communities, one of the things that really hit me sometime in 2014 is how, despite the fact that many of us who run NGOs, although we take pride in the work we do, we still live in bubbles, right? We come back home to our safe zones. We're really not living with the vulnerable populations and making a difference out there. So it is removed from that respect. For me, if you look at how the play pans out throughout the book, it is how distanced we are from the actual world, especially those of us who are privileged enough to have been able to have survived lockdown without much damage being inflicted on upon ourselves. So it just panned out that way. And I also, my daughter's also an active theater person, and she's been reading. She's introduced me to a lot of plays, reading plays, and I discovered that. As a writer, of course, right, you can't afford to just read one genre because you are a poet. You can't just afford to read whatever forms of poetry appeal to you. But and reading theater, reading plays really helped me sort of put that in perspective. Have this distance between the writer and what is actually playing out in the outside world. So I think that's where it comes out. Yeah, so it was deliberate.
Okay. Can you share a little about these mandalas kind of thing which accompany some of the poems? What was
Yes. Yeah, so that is actually taken. So the cover page is taken from the Met. It's an open source artwork from the Met Museum. So the mandalas that you see are actually motifs from the book. It's done by a women's group. So it's actually it's taken from different elements of the cover page itself as separators. It was Divya's idea to actually separate the acts of play from the rest of the sections. So one of the things that after during the process, the long process of editing that I went through, one of the things I discovered that there were recurrent themes in the book that kind of popped up. So what I did was um, I ripped open the entire manuscript and put out each of the Haibun and slotted them into the themes that I thought. I was not aware that these were the themes that I was writing on. But then I discovered that they centered around the themes of loss, longing, abandonment. That's something that I keep coming back to. Pain, um, and yeah. So what happens is I structured each of these sections between each section to sort of come into a cycle revolving around these themes. So that's how it happened.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that process with us. So for the next question, I would like us to read one more high one. So Shobna, up to you. You can read it. You can. Somebody of us can volunteer. Whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd love it if one of you want to read.
So does anybody want to volunteer?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Shankar.
Can you just make the screen a little bigger?
Yeah, let me try that. Is this better?
Yes. Thank you. Rorschach's test. Caffeine clouds the cream. Steam spirals. The hostess checks for sugar. Her elderly neighbor likes 2 heaped teaspoons. She pours him a cup, all the time wondering if his tremors will make him drop it. Fairy tale, a forest trail appears from nowhere. Fairy tale, a forest trail appears from nowhere. He hasn't eaten, he says. Even though he lives with his son, he hasn't eaten, he repeats. He tells her she is like a daughter, hands her back her treasured china after a few grateful gulps. Suddenly, the cracks don't matter anymore. Stiletto sounds fading into the night, crickets. Stiletto sounds fading into the night, crickets. The odor lingers long after the cleaning. Patches have settled on the muted gold wallpaper. After a few days, they meld into the walls. Cobwebs, remnants of yesterday, glint in the sun. Cobwebs, remnants of yesterday, glint in the sun.
Thank you, Shankar, for that reading.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you.
so, my question was, Shobna, how did you manage to capture so many senses in one album like this? Smell and hearing and vision and everything is so vivid and visceral. So, how does one do that?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this question, Kinjal. I really don't have a direct answer, except that what I can tell you is the initial draft of what I wrote for this is very different from what has appeared here. So it's gone through relentless editing, taking off. I think one of the reasons it is visceral because this is something that I have borne witness to. So it is something that has and I was trying to capture abandonment is not always for the disadvantaged or less privileged, right? There's I mean in privileged communities, the elderly as we speak are going through social ostracization by their children, and so this is something that really happened. So I was really one of the things I think also is all when you speak about the senses, it's also one of the demands of Haibun writing that you do explore the world with your immediate senses because that's what matters to you. That's what comes across to you immediately. So I think what I was trying to do was just capture what happened. That's about it, and how it has appeared has just largely been relentless editing to the point when Dibya actually had to threaten me and say, if you're not selling it now, we're not doing this book. So, yeah.
So, do you want to, before we go to the next question, do you want to share a little about your editing process in the sense, do
Sure.
you write and then edit, or how do the drafts move?
Mm. So this book has been in the making from 2014. Yeah, sometime from 2014. Um, So the way I like to edit is, I think it holds good for most of us. I like to write. I like to keep a practice of writing every day. Um, but the moment it's done, it goes into my WIP folder, and I don't look at it for some time. And uh, it's very very rarely that a poem or something comes to me in full. Um, but most of the time, it is when I don't look at it and I come back to it, say, so there is some, so Rorschach test is something that I think took me about 3 years to write. So there's this immediate act of writing when you're witness to something and it immediately goes down into the computer. I don't write with a pen and paper anymore or a diary anymore. It's either on my phone or on the computer. So there's that immediate act of writing, and then once I put it away, what I do is I come back to it. Um, Say, something happens, and it triggers a thought that makes you want to go back and look at this piece of writing, and that's when I'm very brutal with it, brutal with with I like to look at it on the whole the first time to see whether it makes sense. Especially in the case of the Haibun, the haiku matter a lot. I first see whether the haiku is really lifting. There is a link and shift from the prose to the haiku. So that involves a lot of changes. See whether I want it to be a monoku or a 3-line haiku or a 4-line sometimes. Um, and then and then I put it away again and then come back to it later on. And then that's when I get into the editing it line by line. So I look at the first line and see whether it can be made better. Am I saying too much? So this is again one of the lessons that came to me by a very renowned hygiene, Anjali Deodar. She's not alive anymore, but she had a sort of a huge influence on most of us writing haiku and haibun forms. Um, she told me, she said, um, write what you know about, because this came about when I remember writing some haiku and sending it to her, and I wrote something about a dragonfly, and it was hopelessly wrong. So and she's like 75, so very politically incorrect. So she's and very unapologetically so. And she said, Shobhana, this got nothing to do with the dragonfly. Can I ask you to please write about what you know? Don't imagine, because haiku is not that. And so that again comes from the master, Basho, right? Basho says, if you want to write about the bamboo, become the bamboo, right? I mean, how profound is that? Go to the bamboo if you want to learn about the bamboo. So that has sort of been one of the key driving principles of how I approach this form. And it's had a profound influence on the way I write free verse. I think when you write a constrained form, you begin to become adept at cutting down redundancies. You see whether this word is really needed. So you become so right now, and in our work as editors of Sonic Boom, we invite short poems. So we find that our tolerance for longer poems is so is narrowed down, because there is so much you can say, right? With especially with haiku and haikai writing, there is so much you can say with so little. And if you look at the masters and some of the fantastic contemporary writers we have today, it's amazing. I mean, what they can say. So the process of editing is to leave, especially with Haibun, with this book, has been to leave it as sparse as possible, so that there is room for the reader to. And I hope I have achieved that. Really, I don't know whether I have.
I think you have. In my reading, I felt like there's so much room, and it's a very spacious, nice book. So,
Thank you.
uh, so for the next question, I would again like to share two more poems with Shobna's permission.
Sure.
So, this is Wings. Does anybody would like to read it, or Shobna, do you want to read it?
I think Swati said she
Yeah,
was.
go ahead, Swati.
Wings. She wants to go to boarding school. I'm old enough, she says. Isn't she too young to fly, we think? How do we let her go? How will she celebrate her birthday? How will we celebrate her? Wake every morning and not see her disheveled appearance and wide toothed grin as she comes for her morning hug? Or cope with not seeing her sprawled on the floor cushions watching her favorite TV show? Who will we chide to keep things in order and plan ahead? What about conversations on crushes and the gossip she fervently retells? Who will be there when she cries, lost, wanting directions, or just a good sit down? But Ma, she cries, her artist in the making voice emphatic, this will always be home. Blue Moon, the voice of a childhood. Friend. Blue Moon, the voice of a childhood. Friend. Quill, their birthing has taken time, sometimes years. One's favorite lines are erased for want of a better word. There is an unscrutable melancholy that settles into every day, the kind that worries about the depletion of the Amazon and child poverty in the country. Loneliness creeps upon the heart in the happiest of moments. Verse becomes an outpouring of all that emotion. Between sunset and sunrise, all the silences. Between sunset and sunrise, all the silences. Finally, at the reading, the poets bare their souls. Pages morph into voices from faraway lands. Longing, loss, everydays, and philosophy take turns, playing different tones as they come. All the time, the eyes scan audience reactions. Barren feels, hoping the IVF shots work this time. Barren feels, hoping the IVF shots work this time.
Thank you so much, Swati, for that
Thank
reading.
you, Swati. Thank you for such a beautiful reading. Thank you.
So, Shobna, my question was about how do you attain distance from reality when you're writing something so poignant, or how do you deal with the distance between the verses and your real life and that emotional detachment?
Um, I think again I think that's something that for me, I speak for myself when I say this. It is something that I have learned along the way because if when I look back at the first book that went out, there are some very cringeworthy poems and say very sound very angsty, very ranty, and then over time you learn to sort of distance yourself. And again, this is a very classic trait of how the haibun is. When you write haiku and when you write haibun, you are not encouraged to allow your author intrusion to play into the role, which I think for me has been one of the greatest learning experiences. So you state what is there as is, so that's what haikai writing is all about. So the distance naturally comes where you are talking about something that is happening as we speak. So it's almost like a running commentary. So which is why all Haibun writing that you find um, anywhere in reputed journals and by the contemporary writers and the masters is there are really no room for too many adjectives, too much description. So you write it as you see it, you write it as you feel it, as you hear it. So I think it comes from the demands of the form that haibun writing is. That's what happens. But I did experiment a lot with the way the haiku was structured. For example, the blue moon, the voice of a childhood friend, actually appears in an anthology as the voice of in line 2 and of a childhood friend in line 3. But I thought the enjambment between childhood and friend works very well. So I pushed childhood to the second line and pushed friend very intentionally for this. It's something, again, I owe to the relentless editing that I have done on this. And here I must recognize the enormous help that I had from fellow poet, I think who's done a session for you, Sony. He helped me chisel this, so I really owe my enormous gratitude to him. The enjambment is something that I again worked on to just see that. And haikai writing again is especially with the haibun eschews the use of I, the pronoun, too much. There's, which is again, I think, one of the reasons why there seems to be a distinct difference between what is happening and what the author is saying. It is a distinct form of, they do frown upon too much of the use of I. Um, and I think when you read vernacular writing, you also find this, right? There is no capitalization of the letter. So in most of my free verse poems, I eschew from writing I in the capital simply because it seems so, it seems too grandiose to attribute this huge feeling to this one person. So I hope I've answered your question, Kinjal. I don't know if I've done justice to it.
Yeah, it has been extremely helpful. Thank you. So we can now throw the questions open to the audience if anybody has any questions for Shobna before we move to the writing exercise.
Shobna, can I just barge in as usual with my question?
Yeah, sure.
Because I'll forget it. That's the thing. So you spoke about like drama and that you read drama. So I'd love to hear which ones you read and why and what your experiences there were.
Okay,
Anything.
woefully inadequate. Woefully inadequate. Okay. So I love Abhishek Majumdar of Indian Ensemble. I think his one of his most recent work appeared in the Bangalore Review. Right. I've read Lynn Nottage, um, phenomenal for her power of expression and stuff, but not nearly as much as I've read the numerous drafts of my daughter's attempts at playwriting. So, yeah, so these two are the ones that immediately come to mind, Mandakini. Um, Abhishek Majumdar in India, definitely.
Shobana, I was just wondering, do you always think of it in terms of a haibun, or do you sometimes write it as a prose and then years later you're like, yes, this would work well as a haibun or a haiku?
Right. No, I think I since I write nonfiction, free verse, short stories, and haibun, I'd say this particular thing, called out to me in the form of the haibun. In none of these poems really appeared to me in the free verse form. So, I mean, it started out as haibun, and then the haiku was a natural progression. So, I mean, there really was no thought to that. Mm, so so there are some things that only come to me as short stories, right? So they refuse to lend themselves to poems. But I do have a lot of anecdotal poems that that somehow call out in free verse. So I think it's more of what it probably and I discovered that it's got not much to do with what I'm reading at the time, because when I'm writing my nonfiction books, racing against the deadline, that's the time I find that I can write the most poetry. So I'm, chapter 10 is due tomorrow morning, and I'm writing free verse tonight. So with no regard for the deadline whatsoever. So it's got nothing to do with what I'm reading or what I'm working on at the moment. But yeah, this one, if I may speak a little bit about it, is it started out as a journey to mainly as a process of internalization, because when you're working with these very, very vulnerable sections, marginalized people, homeless, abandoned by their children, uh, at one point it became so traumatic that I had to find catharsis in some way. So this basically started out as actually finding solace through writing. That's all I do when there is despair. That's all I turn to. So it actually started out like that, and it was Anjali who actually looked at it first and said, why don't you make a book out of it? This was sometime in 2016. She said you should make a book out of this. And for me, writing a book out of this is, for me, writing a book, getting a book out is just a journey, is a point to tell me whether I have grown from my previous work to this work. So I've made a promise to myself that if I don't grow, then I will stop writing. That will be my last book. So it's also a measure of whether I've grown. Sorry for digressing, Swati. I think I digressed a lot there.
Uh, Shobna, I have a question. Like poetry for me is about freedom and the expression that you have. So while I was listening to you describing Haibun, so I heard a lot of rules, regulations. Okay, you are allowed to do this. This is frowned upon. So why did you put yourself into this restriction? Some where you come from a free verse world, and why did you put yourself into this rules and regulation? Why? I
Um,
want to know the process behind it.
Yeah. So rules and regulations, I think constraints are fantastic. It's not. I would not call it constraints, Prathamesh. Rather than it's a particular aesthetic that is rooted in Japanese, in Japanese culture and all things Japanese. So it was just a different sensibility for me, basically, and. See, these things also resonate very strongly with things I believe for myself. So I think that's why I gravitated towards this form. And actually, I mean, if you look at a contemporary Haibun practitioner, I have actually broken quite a few of the rules. And I mean, play settings, and there's a letter, there is a speech, I mean, there's a conversation. So I mean, it's really not very traditional Haibun in the sense of the word. So I have actually broken a lot of ground in terms of trying to experiment with that. But the thing is, yes, I think constraints and different sensibilities are good, because how else will we grow, right? So even in the free verse world, we experiment with form structured poetry. We do sonnets, we attempt writing the ghazals, so which have, and they only improve our sensibilities, right? And the way we view. I think it's helped my perspective of writing itself greatly. And I'd say that for anybody who attempts haikai writing, it changes the way you look at the power of words, right? Every word. So in Japanese, there's this term called kotadama, which talks about the spirit of words. Almost like every word has a particular weight. So you learn to value that word in a sentence or in a phrase, and work on seeing whether something better would fit that, or is the word necessary at all. So, and from that point of view, I think it's greatly helped me as a writer. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question. Does that answer it? Yeah.
Shobna, I have a question. I have tried writing haiku quite a few times, and I've failed miserably. And now you were saying that you started with haiku, and now you recognize that they were kind of 3-line poems, and now then you started to write haikus. What really changed? I mean, because I'll tell you why I'm trying to know this. Because
Please.
if I can imbibe that in myself, probably my haikus will be better. Not will be 3-line
Right.
silly poems, right?
See, the thing is, haiku is there's a fragment and then there is a phrase. There are typically two images, right? And what most of what I write is not haiku. It's called senryu, and I'll just type it for you in the chat box. Yeah, this. Sorry for auto check, spell check. Yeah, senryu. Senryu is haiku is where nature takes predominance. There is that's what it is. But so most of my the haiku that appear in this collection are actually senryu, because they talk about human frailties, right? So it's important that it has when you attempt haiku, I think it's best to start with some of the seminal essays that I could send you some links. I could share them with Kinjal, that she could share with all of you in turn, where you're actually guided through the process of what connotes a fragment and a phrase, right? So if you are writing about the moon, what kind of a moon are you writing about? Right? And what is the contrasting image? So, and there are different ways in which you explore this. So there is the zoom in and the zoom out effect. So, there is something that you look at as at the cosmos, the sky, and then bring it down to a beetle on the ground. So that's the zoom out, zoom in effect. And there's the horizontal axis and the vertical. There's just so much, just like we have in free verse and poetry, right? So I think a good place, I think I got lucky because I signed up for a workshop that was run by one of the most prominent Indian writing today. So I think the place we start is very, very important. Arun, perhaps some journals will help you, guide you to the process of writing.
Yeah, I'm going to read them. I was just wondering because when I was reading, the
Yeah,
your Haibun, right, and when that
yeah,
haiku portion, especially, actually, I was having this some kind of, I don't know, very brutally, very to say, very rather vulgarly to say this, I was having a fluctuation of emotion, and I
yeah.
know that it is hard to achieve. So I was thinking that how is that possible that it is being achieved, and how come I cannot achieve it? So uh, and what is that was happen? And you yourself confessed that that was not happening in the beginning. And then I was thinking that in this journey, what really happened? Of course, you learned, but what changed? Have you noticed any change? When you were
Yeah,
writing or inside you, or the way you were looking, that helped.
yeah, patience definitely, Arun. So I think, I can say this safely because I think this is a safe space to talk about. Um, if you look at the world of publishing today, people are so eager to get, you write 10 haiku and then you want to get published in magazines. So patience is something, and I think that's definitely come from my associations with Geetanjali and Sonam, who are notorious recluses, right? I mean, they don't have a book out, but they are easily two of the best masters that I would call writing in the haiku world today. And also extensively read Japanese haiku, although in translation. So it gives you the sense, because it is a different aesthetic, right? Although we are in the Oriental belt, there is a synergy of cultures and stuff like that. Japanese haiku writing, haikai writing is so intricately involved with the seasons and the moods and the seasons, and we can relate to that very, very closely in India. That's patience, one thing, and another thing is I think you know. I think being brutal with yourself, that's something that I was with this particular work. Looking back, I think, if I could turn back time, I wish I had waited to put my second collection out. I may not have done it in 2014 when I did, but at that time it seemed very important for me to get that work out because it seemed ready. But patience is something, and brutality about this process, especially that I told you. Like, it was ready in March 2019. I sent it out to Divya, and he sent me it was laid out and everything by April. But something tells you, I think, there is, when you're writing something tells you that this needs work. It's a very tiny voice at most times, but it tells you that, hey, you know what, this could actually become better. And that's when I know that, okay, this is not ready to go out, but it's come the very hard way. It's come. Yeah. Have I answered your question, Arun?
Yes, I mean, I took this that I have to be patient, try, and read a lot, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hope for the best.
No, I think you're being unnecessarily harsh with yourself. So, the right balance between being harsh and being gentle on yourself, I think, is very important, because um, we are very quick to do that, right? Because, I mean, I'm a notorious skeptic of my work. And Sony is here. Thanks for being here, Sony. Sony will know the number of agony calls I've placed to him saying, you know what, I hate this work. I'm not going to send it out. I'm going to retract the manuscript. He said, shut up, I just sent it. And then Dibya said, okay, I'm taking this to print, whether you like it or not. So you also need that, I think this balance between skepticism and knowing when it's not working. You know when it's not working. I think all of us know when a piece is not working for ourselves before anybody even points it out to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
So, does anybody have any more questions for Shobhana? But before we move to that, can we take a picture, please? We at Pune Writers Group have a thing.
Yes.
Take a
I'm
picture
going
for
to take
every
my
session.
glasses off so I look less evil.
Can everybody please turn on their cameras?
I can't see it like this.
Shankar, Rabash, Sharda, Sony, Jinju.
Abbas, Sharda, Sony, and Alka too. If you can. Okay.
Thank you. So, are there any more questions for Shobhana?
I have a question. I noticed that certain lines were repeated twice. Could you shed a little bit of light on what that is, or if there's a tradition that exists there within Haibun?
Yeah, usually the haiku is read twice because of the brevity of its form, just to lay emphasis on the different sounds. It's usually that's the haiku is read twice, usually, just like the ghazal, right? You repeat lines, nothing else. Because I think it's the haiku is also called a one breath poem. So there is the danger of missing out, the beauty of the words that appear in the form. I think primarily, I think that's how it started. Yeah. Thank you, NS.
Uh, should we move to the writing exercise, Shobhana? Yeah, so up to you.
I had one question.
Yeah, please.
How do you go about editing a Haibun? Do you focus on the prose, or how is the weightage in your mind divided to the?
Both, Sumit, both actually. Um, um, so I was actually editing haiku up to the last moment actually in this book. So, so it both. I don't think I look at the weightage. See, one of the things is when you write a haibun and when it has multiple haiku in it, I think the challenge is to see whether there are three components, right, to the haibun. There's the title, there are the haiku, and then there's the prose. So the title has to be a little distant from there has to be a link and a shift between the title and the prose, and there has to be a link and a shift between the prose and the haiku. So if there is a haiku that connects, so if I could just share. So if I could just say, so this bit, right? So between daydream and the haiku, there has to be a link and a shift, right? And from here, again, there is a link and a shift. So it's not direct. So this is about parakeets and this is about somebody else, right? So there has to be a link and a shift. So that is really important. So that is something that I think I really paid a lot of attention to. And again here, so why the pause between, I mean, why the extra space between these two, and why is this two-line haiku? Because I think it just speaks better. So this also arrived after a lot of editing, and to see whether there is synergy between it as a whole, and if there is whether it works independently. And another characteristic of the haiku in Haibun is a haiku is also meant to work as a standalone piece of poetry. So if you remove the haibun, it should make sense on its own. So it can't be intricately so linked to the haibun. So I think those are the elements I definitely looked for. And with the haiku, like some of the things, there's this there's this joke in the haiku world that sometimes we all write "so what" haiku. So I mean, haiku has this aha moment where you're trying to actually talk about something that is apparent but is not actually to the sensory perception. So so what haiku is like, yeah, so what, I mean, So what happens if it's there, right? So that was something that I was very conscious about when I looked at, to see whether there are any so what haiku, and also I have experimented a lot with monoku, which is single line haiku and 3 lines, so to see what fit in best with that particular piece of prose. So some of the Haibun here, if I can show you one particular, I'm not too sure where that is. The last one.
Being, I think being is also.
No, this one second. Yeah, so this was taken from John Lennon's
Imagine.
piece. Yeah, piece. So the left line and the right line. So these arrived only as towards the end of the process, right? You write it and then you see whether it works that way, and there is a reason why this is left aligned and this is right aligned. So these are the things that actually went into as the book evolved. Actually, it didn't come as I was writing it immediately. Have I answered your question, Sumit?
Yeah, I had one more key. If when you think about these three parts, right? Do
Yeah.
you think of them as like getting closer? Like the title drags the reader in,
Hmm.
and do you see the prose and the poem as the next steps, or are they meant to look all three at the same time? Yeah,
I think the title is what everybody looks at first, right? You
yeah.
look at the title and then it draws you into the haiku or into the prose, and so for me, I think I wrote the prose first. I write the prose, and I write the haibun first, and then the title comes much later.
Mhm.
It's I've always had a very big difficulty with titling. Whether it is for anything, for my nonfiction books or for my poetry books, I've always struggled. So this A Sky Full of Bucket List is actually taken from one of the haiku in the book. It's my first one was Lost Possibilities, and it was a time of the lockdowns, right? So Divya said, listen, we have enough hopelessness going around now. Can we not have something that's so dismally sad? So that was what I actually thought. And I was like, okay, I discovered that I'm horrible at titling, very, very bad at that. So that titling is something that I come to only much later to see, okay, this kind of works.
Okay. It's a fantastic title, by the way. Sky Full of Bucket List. Yeah.
I think I just lucked out on it because Divya initially said, okay, let me just think about it. Can we think of something visceral? And it came after many, many many title options. So, yeah. So, and then I said, yeah, I took the help of a lot of friends for that. And we came up with different titles. And then finally we arrived. I said, okay, fine, this works.
Kinjal?
Yes.
A quick addition to this one, the last,
Please.
may I?
Yeah,
So,
please go ahead.
so that left alignment and right alignment,
Yeah.
have you seen that? I mean, before doing it, have you seen that? Have you heard it? Heard that? What happened? How could you arrive at that decision?
So there was this. So I have a couple of poems of Haibun here that are left and right aligned. It's I think what was. So there's the canon, right? There's John Lennon. So I can't obviously place myself alongside him. So then I said, okay, this has to be this. It can't be. You have to pay obeisance to him, so it has to be naturally. So that's how.
So yours is kind of
Right.
right side, and
Yeah.
Nanan's is left side.
Yes.
Kind of
Yeah. I can share that again for you if you'd like. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I do have another one. I'm just trying to pick that one out, which is Leto Logica, page 17. Mm. So, 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm taking time. Yeah. So this is another one that was left and right, just to give it that conversation effect. So So I thought it, rather than a natural progression of a conversation, I thought it also allows, because you're speaking about pain, which is so abstract, right? So how do you sort of place it in context when you're explaining something as abstract as pain to somebody, especially a doctor, right? So I thought this kind of, there's a lot of space for you to explain, and there's also um, this is also again something that really happened, right? Sometimes you go to the doctor with your ailments, and he asks you, where is it hurting? And you just don't, can't for the life of you tell him, especially if it's an internal injury, you really can't tell him, right? So it came with the grappling of my own emotions. It's actually my own inadequacies that are translated to the page. It's nothing fantastic, really. I mean, there's really no rocket science to this. It's just what I felt that thought worked for that particular thing. And then I had Dibya to bounce the whole idea off. See, that's where I think a great publisher makes so much, can add so much value to what you bring, because what you bring is just a word manuscript, right? And then the transitions, the transformations this entire manuscript goes through at the hands of a publisher. And he says, what is, in fact, he was the one who actually told me initially, he said, can you look at re-altering the flow of the poems, because some of them don't gel. So that's when I kind of ripped open the entire manuscript again. And sort of, labeled each one, saying, okay, this is loss, this is longing, pain, abandonment, and love. So I have all this. So these themes, and then it sort of went into place, and then you realize. So I think the synergy between the writer and the publisher, for me, I think I've been enormously lucky to have somebody like Dibya working on the book, because he brought in so much into the work. And he does this for everybody. If you look at what he's done for other writers, it's just the same kind of energy.
Just to add
Thank
about
you.
the spacing, even in passing on page 47, it's so differently.
Yeah. In Passing actually started out as I wanted it to be a stream of consciousness kind of. Okay, I think I can probably share
If you
that.
can just share that.
Yeah, I can. I will just. Let me just look at it. I'm sorry. I'm just hope this is not sounding like a very self-indulgent exercise.
Absolutely
Not at
not.
all. Not at
Absolutely
all.
not. We are learning quite a bit.
One second.
It's
In fact, I
wonderful
think
that you're
Shobhana, we are
sharing with us.
prodding here. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
my absolute honor to share it with fellow writers. Yeah, so this is In Passing. It started out as an experiment in stream of consciousness. This was when I had actually gone into an apartment. One of our friends had died, and this just talks about what happens in a closed apartment where you only have the central area, right, to lay out the body, especially when it's closed spaces. So it actually started out as a stream of consciousness, and then it was towards the end that Dibya suggested, listen, it's can we just structure this very differently, so that there's more space for the reader. So it was again his suggestion. So all credit to him again.
Brilliant.
So thank you all so much, really. So any other questions? Be happy to answer them in whatever capacity. I don't even know if you're learning from me, but I'm really enjoying this conversation with all of you, really.
We are. We are.
We are learning a lot.
Thank you.
I must remark, like, your wonderful sensibility is such a gift to all of us, I feel. Your way of perceiving, and I just wrote it in the chat. I said, your work honors the everyday, and I think that is what we are in need of honoring, not just the spectacular, by lending it emotional resonance and with such elegant restraint. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I think the problem, the process of refinement is also love. It's applied love, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Dedication.
Yeah, you have to love it, right? You have to love it enough to, you have to, I mean, it's like a truant child, right? You have to love it enough to be able to allow the child to grow, but you also have to discipline it enough so that it it morphs into this beautiful, to this individual, at least that you have in your head, right? See, so I still don't know how I'll view this book a few years down the line, but I think, some friends have always asked me, so if you're so reticent about publishing, why publish at all? I think it's more an indication to oneself. Why one must publish, for me, is very important, because it gives you those marks to tell you, are you learning, right? Are you growing in what you're doing, and can you dedicate yourself enough to a craft to be able to actually dare to go out and put that work out outside? So I think it's very important. So for me, it's more of a very personal exercise, why I publish, why I resort to publishing a book after all. And for me, this one has definitely been very cathartic to write it. It's come at a time of enormous personal transformation. So.
It's lovely to get to know you, because I think it's a way of like holding yourself accountable, not just
Yes.
loving and indulging, but also holding yourself accountable to this process. And, also to all of us, that you offer us something beautiful and something real. And thank you so much. So I don't know when we are going to get it out here in Austria, but I refuse to have an electronic version. I want a paper version. So I'm going to wait for that.
I think it should be out in the international market. So next week is what Divya said. I'll keep you posted.
Excellent.
I can ship out a copy to you, Mandakini. Thank you for your generosity of words. Thanks. Any other questions? Can we go to the prompt?
I'm eager for the writing exercise.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay, yeah, so I don't know whether. So this is something that has worked wonders for me. I think Kinjal and those of you from TQT. I think it's an extension of what we attempted last week. So again, okay, I resort to the haiku sensibilities, the Haikai writing forms. It's this is something that we discussed last week. There is an exercise that that has worked very, very well for me. Is comes again inspired by Basho, who says, if you want to write about the bamboo, go to the bamboo. So there is a 30-day exercise where, and I urge all of you to try it, because it is really very rewarding. Give yourselves 30 days time and pick an object that's outside your house, right? And every day attempt that. So we're going to do attempt to write something about the same thing. So if there's a tree outside your window, attempt to write something about the tree for 30 consecutive days, and you'll be surprised at the kind of images the kind of world that you notice outside. Yeah. So today we're just going to do a very fast food attempt of that prompt. Okay, so if may I ask all of you to reach out to the first object you can get your hands on, first object in your house, and whatever that just calls out to you.
Should we write it in the chat or?
No, not necessary. This is completely for you. Yeah, first object. If you want, put it in the chat, right? Okay, so I'm going to set the timer for the next 10 minutes. And over the next 10 minutes, I want us to be able to look at this same object in different ways. The challenge is you write different verses. So you write how many of the verses you can, short, long, whatever. How many of the verses you can. The only challenge is you cannot repeat any attribute or character or phrase that you've used in any on the next. Right? It has to be a completely new way of looking at it. So if you're looking at your mobile phone, can you look at your mobile phone in 13 different ways? Yeah, 13 different ways, 10 different ways. So are you ready? Any questions on this? You can't repeat any of the attributes. So you've already said blue in verse 1. You can't say blue, or if you say color in verse 1, you cannot ascribe to color in verse 10 or verse 9. You can't do that.
Are we listing attributes or
No, no, you're writing verses. You're writing
descriptions?
verses. So the title of the writing exercise is 9 ways of looking at an everyday object.
So
Yeah, and then maybe at the end of it, we can share what we've written. Yeah.
So we will write 9 verses.
9 verses. Short, long. If you can't do 9, do 5. But the challenge is don't repeat what you've written. So it's completely look at it in a different way. I'm telling you, it's fascinating. You can do it. If I can do it,
Yes.
you guys can definitely do it.
And in 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah, go on, please, please. Yeah, Anita, please.
Um, how long this has to be?
10,
Any number of
any long.
words?
It's fine. You can even write 10 sentences and then later on chisel it
It
into
has to be a sentence or
no,
like few words.
Verse. Yeah, it can be few words. It can be verses. It can be short verses. It can be long verses. Okay, let's take 15 minutes if you think 10 is too long. Trust me, 10 minutes you can do it.
Let's keep it 10.
Yeah, 10. So I'm going to
10,
set
yeah.
the timer, right? Yeah, second part to this exercise that has also, worked many, many times for me. The second is where it helps you practice this distance, right, that we were talking about when you put out something, because when you're writing something, it's the immediate. And the reason why a verse form works better for prompts is because the space between the one stanza and another gives you that sort of distance, right? It allows you to pause before you go to the next one. So that's simply why I picked the verse form, because it's nothing that what Shankar wrote with his prose was just brilliant. But the verse, I think, for me, works simply because of the distance it allows between the two stanza. The second is when you look at what you've written afresh and then start peeling off the layers, right? So the first is to look at the apparent redundancies. So there are the apparent redundancies, and then there are the very subtle redundancies that come out as the third layer. So in the second layer, look for the apparent redundancies, the apparent repetitions. And when you look at that and you look at the object again and look at what you've written, what happens is there is a new discovery that happens because you're looking at it for the 10th time. If you've done it 9th time, there's something else that pops. And when we're looking at immediate objects, each of it is related to a very personal, intimate memory, right? Because what can you look at from your desk? You're either at your desk or you're at your dining table or you're in an intimate space of work. So every object that you reach out for will hold an intimate memory. So the second part of the exercise is where you look at peeling those. So then you realize that some of what we've written, they're very obvious. They don't need to be said. So then you delve into the second layer, right? And then you go back to it again the next day, and then you do this exercise over a period of 4 or 5 days, and it's amazing the kind of memories it will hold, right? So let me narrate the example. So I picked this salt and pepper shaker when I was doing the prompt a couple of days back and setting the timer and stuff, and it's amazing how the memory takes you back to childhood, to the first time, and to the different salt and pepper shakers we've had, right? And very, very lovely ones that I've been witness to. Seen at different homes and stuff. And so it kind of jogs different spaces of memory. That's what this exercise basically does. While staring at the 30-day exercise of looking out at the tree, gives you a very different notion of getting to know new species of birds and flora and fauna. You don't know that all these creatures actually inhabit this tree outside your house. That's a different experience. But looking at an object that is intimate and it's in your immediate surrounding is it tickles very, very different memory spheres. It did for me, and I hope it will do the same for you.
So you would suggest that we could take, for example, the object that we took today and continue writing about the same object for 10 days or 30
Uh,
days.
yeah, so what I would suggest, Swati, is you've got something out now, right? You've got those 10 things about the pen that you've written. So look at it from that perspective, because that's your first impression, and that's coming from a place of known memory,
Right.
right? Immediate memory.
Mhm.
So and you will be able to peel the layers that it has, right? So a lot of yours has come from you've kind of traced the journey of the pen from the store to your house. So what other memory does it evoke? What does that pen evoke for you? What have you done with it? So did you write an essay with it? What did you do? What do you do with pens when we're in a world of computers, right? So that becomes the second layer. So then you're harnessing a deeper space in memory, right? You're not harnessing the immediate memory, you're harnessing a deeper space in memory. So which means then it gives birth to new expressions. uh, then you're able to find out which of these matter to you, which is the true story that you want to tell, right? See, because one of the challenges that I think all of us face, especially when we write fiction or whatever, is this attempt not to be pretentious, right? How honest can we be in our retelling of the stories that we create, right? So what happens in an exercise like this is it helps you dwell, dig into spaces that you actually didn't know that they existed at all. So it is again, Arun, it is an exercise in patience, because you're going back to it and there's actually nothing. If you speak to a non-writer and say, you know what, I'm looking at a pen every day, 10, they'll probably think you've gone cuckoo, right? Like most of my family does think that about me. But it's fascinating what it really unearths. Like, for example, Basho's most famous poem is The Sound of a Frog Jumping into Water, right? It's a haiku. Of course, I'm paraphrasing it. So there is a book that talks about 100 translations of that very haiku. The Old Pond, The Sound of a Frog Jumping in Water. That's the haiku of Basho. There's a book, 100 translations of that. Just that haiku. And look at the number of words, right? You have old pond, the sound of a frog jumping in water. Just 10 words, that's it. 100 translations to that. And you can't change much, right? You can't take away frog, you can't take away water, you can't take away old, you can't take away pond. So how does this, so that's primarily where this prompt came from. And I hope you find it helpful.
We did a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So anybody else wants to share anything about prompts that actually work for them that you exercise in? Or perhaps we can exchange notes a couple of days later about where this writing went for you personally in the journey. Where did this morph into, right? What did this morph into?
Personally, I'd be very happy if you read just one more from your.
I'd be delighted to. Let me pick one. Is that okay with all of you? Am I keeping you all?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay. So this is again about the how the elderly kind of, are become very invisible in our lives, right? Especially when you're younger, they seem so distant in the horizon, right? So this particular thing was written after an interview I had with a nonagenarian for one of my nonfiction books. So I came back and then wrote this a couple of years ago. So this is called Alchemy. Would you like me to share it for you?
Yes, please.
Yeah, 1 second. Page 53. Yeah, Alchemy. Nursery rhymes, one by one, the mynahs take off. Nursery rhymes, one by one, the mynahs take off. In 1958, he was a strapping young man who had just returned from Minnesota. He could have got himself any job. Instead, he plunged headlong into teaching. The room is sparse, and he urges his son to draw the only wooden chair for the visitor. His eyes light up at the year 1965. Yes, that is when he spent 4 nights in a row tending to a bunch of sick adolescent boys in a hostel. Fridge magnets, home just a pit stop now. Fridge magnets, home just a pit stop now. His quivering hands reach out for a handwritten note that he has spent the entire morning writing. He regales the visitor with anecdotes of a time when all a teacher had to do on was to rely on was the blackboard and chalk. Of course, some histrionics and a theatre voice, he adds, laughing. At the college reunion, he is remembered with great fondness and then, like always, promptly forgotten. Another sundown, a fall of golden showers on the cortege. Another sundown, a fall of golden showers on the cortege. So, Dakini, that was for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for indulging me so much.
It's not indulging, you're sharing. Please don't be so, self-effacing. It's a great gift. I think poetry is a, gift that we distill from our best hours and when our perception is at the finest. And in that way, it's really a gift. Not just like a gifted poet, but a gift to the listener and the reader. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything I can share with all of you is, just like writing poetry can help prose, writing haikai definitely helps, sharpen the senses. And I really hope that all of you will visit it sometime. Those of you who haven't yet will visit it sometime to delve into this beauty that beauty that this form offers, all these forms offer.
I discovered something just right now. Okay, is that probably what you are doing deliberately or instinctively, or what is happening to me is that surprise and relevance at almost at the same time. So it comes with a little bit of surprise, and immediately my mind says, no, it is relevant. It is relevant. It's not very surprising. So this is very strange feeling. So I mean, when the say the first haiku, right? Suddenly I was not expecting the minors will fly away, and when they do, then I said, yeah. It's a tale, right? It will. They will. And then immediately the jump of another story. And the same thing happens, right? When drawing that chair, visitor's chair. I mean, that is absurd, but surprising. And then my mind is actually forcing me to believe that no, it's okay. It's all right. That's a great skill. It's a great skill.
Thank you you're very, very kind, Arun. Thank you. And no, the miners is just all of us see it, right? I mean, on rooftops, miners sitting, and they just take off one by one before they form that. And before, right? See, I was born in the Nilgiris, right? And I spent my entire childhood there. And I'm surprised, like, I didn't make use of that. And when I started writing haiku, I discovered that I only knew the crow, the pigeon, and the myna. I couldn't tell anything else, right? And so, especially with collaborative writing with people like Sonam, she would talk about barbets and she would talk about fascinating creatures. And I mean, so many of them are out here, right outside our homes. And in Coimbatore, where I live, is borders on the Western Ghats. We're home to such an array of flora and fauna that we're just completely blind, right? So haiku really did that for me, really awakened the senses. It hasn't awakened. I'm still very, very poor at, telling one word from the other. But I mean, it's at least you're on the journey, you're on the path. So, I mean, that's what you can be grateful for, right? So,
thank you so much, Shobhana, for joining us today. It has been very instructive. I was not wrong. It was brilliant session. So thank you so much.
thank you, Kinjal. I think, it is the generosity of your cohort to have invited me and to have shared so willingly. And I think I've learned so much from all of you. Thank you for, I think as writers, everybody has their, for want of a better word, let me say, clique, right? Everybody has, right? You have the software guys who gang up, and I mean, it's so wonderful. If the pandemic has done anything at all, it's brought us so close with a bunch of writers. None of us has met, but we share such warmth and kinship with. And I think I owe so much of that learning experience to the time of the pandemic, of finding friends like Kinjal and Mandakini, Sumit, and of course Abbas is gone here. But thank you for this, and thank you for making me a part of today's wonderful session. And you guys are so insanely talented. There's a treasure trove that you have to workshop and get better at it. Send to publishing houses, to some journals, just from the prompt that you wrote. There's so much talent out there. Hats off to all of you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Shobhana.
Thank you, Shobhana.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you. Wonderful to have you.
Wonderful.
Bye, everybody. Have a
Bye.
great
Bye.
day.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Much
you
Shobhana.
again,
love.
Kinjal and
Bye.
Sumit. Thank
Bye.
you.
Lots of
Bye-bye.
love.
Bye.
Bye.